That's really interesting that the pause is a way to notice what you've just experienced emotionally. Yeah, I like
Mhm.
that.
This really relates back to what you just taught us, is that you loosen and shake up everything. Then
Mhm.
you pause and you can really notice where either the blockage or release is. I mean, you really
Mhm.
can feel it more, and you pause
Mhm.
and notice. You take deep breaths. We usually have people keep their eyes closed if they were able to close their eyes, and you really connect into your body in a different way.
We're pros at this now, Tanmeet.
I know.
It's so good to see you, my
It
friend.
feels
How
like
are you?
coming to this, like coming home. It's like a monthly
I
home.
know. I know. It's so great because, like, we always know that we're going to connect to do these podcast interviews. So it's so fun. I'm so excited to do this one with you. This is, again, for all the listeners, we are doing these podcast episodes once a month, myself and Dr. Sethi. You all know that we're good friends and have known each other for years and years, went to medical school together, have grown up together, in our later life, grown up together as adults, not as
Yeah.
kids. And, a lot of our conversations on this podcast come out of our own personal conversations on the phone and while we're walking and talking and that kind of thing, because you're in Seattle and I'm in Chicago. And we were chatting a few weeks ago about, summer plans, the kids, our families. And you were telling me about your son, your older son, Sej, who is getting ready to hike, or well, he already probably did it, was getting ready to hike the Camino Trail in Spain, which is so cool.
Mhm.
And we
Yeah.
were just talking about movement and getting outside and playing and all this stuff. And you said something that really sparked a thought for me. And we kind of went off from that, was that, movement is so much more than physical. And that was sort of the starting point of this conversation that we're going to have. So I just wanted to kind of give our listeners a context behind what we were doing or talking about.
Yeah. And really what we were talking about was how movement is so critical, and we know it's critical for physical health. We even know it's critical for mood, right? We all know
Mhm.
that depression, one of the best actually most effective treatments for depression is movement, exercise.
Mhm.
But what we don't talk enough about is how movement really is this way to move us into a new space. And I think that's what we were really excited to talk about today.
Yeah, exactly. And because I do think that there is so much focus on physical exercise, and I think that's another point we should bring up, is this idea of movement versus exercise, because I think
Yes.
we're using words very intentionally. You and I, we do that a lot, I think, because everything gets conflated. And this is not about exercise. This is about moving your body and your emotions and doing much more than the physical. But I think that's important too, right?
Big time. I mean, I feel like I'm constantly saying to patients, that I'm not talking about counting your steps or,
Right.
how many minutes a week you get. That's all super important in a different context.
Mhm.
But what I'm talking about is why we move to literally survive and then thrive.
Okay, so tell me about that. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think that we get really stuck if we don't
Yeah.
move. And so I really, I say this a lot too. It's like a broken record, but I really think that if we don't move our bodies, then our minds can't move either. And so
Mhm.
we feel stuck. We feel stuck in a rut or stuck in a habit or stuck in a way of being or a mood. And we
Mhm.
don't realize that we need movement to move that as well.
Right. Okay, so we're going to get into that, but let's go back for a second, because we should talk about really fast, just, in general, movement. And again, not as exercise, but there's been a lot of studies on, quote, exercise and physical movement and why it's so important for health. So like, just let's back up and talk about that. And then let's go into, some of the data of, exercise, that kind of physical movement and what it does for health. And then we can move into sort of this idea that we have, that the physical movement also helps with the emotional and mental movement that we really want to get into.
Yeah.
So I mean, we know the benefits of exercise for our bodies and brains. I know you looked up a couple studies that, prescribe this. So what would you say about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't even look up a couple because there are literally thousands of studies
Mhm.
on exercise and mood and well-being, and it is without fail been shown that it is the most effective tool for our mood,
Mhm.
more than medications, even more than counseling. All those are important, but nothing beats exercise as a prescription. And
Yeah.
when they look at that, it comes to somewhere around 150 minutes a week and some combination of maybe cardio and resistance training
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
high intensity interval training.
Mhm.
But that's all sort of, those are the logistics we're not getting bogged down into
Right.
today.
Yeah.
And so all of that is good. The more you have of that, great. But what we're saying is that even if you have that, I would say, are
Mhm.
you moving enough when you need to through the day to move your emotions and your
Yeah.
mind? And that's what we want to dig into.
Yeah, I think that's so important because so many of us will, who are trying to do this physical movement as exercise to, to get those health benefits, right? Let's those ones. Even if we do that, we're not necessarily then also using physical movement as a way to move our emotions, right? Because we're like, oh, I did that already. I went to that class in the morning, or I went to the gym, or I did whatever. I went for my run, right? I got my physical exercise. And yes, that is absolutely really helpful to move emotions and thoughts. But I think what you're talking about is like actually using movement as a tool, as a
Mhm.
strategy for when you are in those mental and emotional places to actually use it as a tool to move, to start
Right.
moving everything, right? That's kind of
Right.
what you're getting at. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, haven't you ever I mean, I feel like I definitely say this to myself that, I
Mhm.
just need to go take a quick walk and
Yeah.
I need to, sort of move things out a little bit. And
Mhm.
I think people think that kind of, but don't think then that this could be a strategy in the way you're saying. And, if we think of it that way, then we understand that we can implement all kinds of different movements into our day when we need it, when we're
Mhm.
feeling reactive,
Mhm.
frustrated, stuck,
Mhm.
angry,
Mhm.
sad. We can bring movement in to move energy. And I mean, really, I mean, this is so relevant to Ayurveda in terms
Mhm.
of emotions being energies in motion
Mhm.
that, that is really at the heart of how Ayurveda really works with emotions.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, and we'll get into that in a minute, but because yoga and asana is about energy, and we're going to go there in a second, but I just want to go back to something you said, which is, you know, if you can use it as a strategy, right? So as a tool in the moment when you are frustrated, upset, feeling down, whatever emotion it is, to help process that. Um, is there also a way then also to like sort of almost build it into your day, right? Like, I mean, I think you can do both. And I think that that can be really, really beneficial of like forcing yourself to get up and go for that walk or whatever it is. How do you do that for yourself every day?
Yeah. So I force myself in the morning to do some
Mm-hmm.
movement.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, most of the time, that's outside. But if for some reason it's raining really hard or the weather isn't that great, then it might be in my house stretching or a little bit of yoga. I try to not work at my desk for longer than an hour and a half or so.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to get up and move. When I'm
Right.
seeing patients, that's harder in terms of I don't have those built in
Right.
times. So then I do it before or after a half day of clinic. But somehow just implementing that movement into the day as a scheduled thing. I
Mm-hmm.
honestly, it's not because I'm so good. It's because I can't function that well if I don't do that. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
I found for myself.
Yeah. I've definitely found that too, is that when I notice the days that I start with a long walk, or, not even a long walk, 15 minutes of a walk just around the park in front of my house, I actually feel better all day long. I've noticed that pattern. And I've also noticed that when I am getting frustrated or upset about something, while I'm working and I'm writing or whatever it is, I had a weird call with somebody or a meeting,
Yeah.
and I give myself that break of like getting up from my desk and going outside and going for a walk, or like you said, stretching or moving or doing something, I actually can come back to what I'm doing and feel like I've kind of reset myself, and I can start from like sort of a balanced place again, or like a neutral place a
Yeah,
lot of the
and I think that probably, I mean, all of the
time.
data we have on exercise is really transferable and relevant here, which is that we know that when we move, we secrete endorphins, which are feel good molecules, right?
Mhm, mhm,
And we secrete actual particular molecules from our muscles called myokines that actually are anti inflammatory messengers that message and communicate with all of our organs. But here I'm talking about the brain. So actually give messages to our brain. I mean,
mhm,
when we move, I think we are really giving our body a signal of how to move literally and metaphorically through
mhm,
something.
mhm. Yeah. And I mean, I think that that's so important that we also remember that our bodies are actually responding with all these hormones that they're releasing. Like I feel like and I'm totally, guilty of it too. I forget about that. I forget about how incredibly, sort of smart and intelligent our bodies are. And our bodies are connected to our heads for a reason,
Right.
not like they're separate. And so obviously there's something that's going to be communicated between our heads, our minds, and our bodies. And so why not use that connection in this way? Because our physiology is using it, right? Like you said, we're releasing these endorphins and myokines and neurochemicals, all those feel good hormones, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, right? Those are all stimulated when we move our physical body.
Mhm.
So it's like that in itself is a strategy, right? If you just
Right.
think about it that way, right?
Exactly.
You could say to yourself, okay, it's time for, a hormone release break or whatever you want to call it. Like, let's stimulate those hormones. Let's go for a walk.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know any other way. If we had a medication that could secrete them right
I
away,
know.
we would, but we do. We have it's called movement, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Like we're so programmed in the West to take a medication to help with everything, and we don't even realize that it's already in our bodies. We just have to activate it. That's all we have
Exactly.
to do. It's kind of an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah. Movement
Yeah.
medicine.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about emotions and processing, the
Mhm.
emotions. And so this idea of emotions and energy in motion. So tell me about that. You had a really interesting point in here.
Yeah, I mean, just it's that thing again of, if you they're supposed to be in motion. So
Mhm.
emotions are energy, and if they're not moving, they get stuck. So if you
Yeah.
don't move your body, your mind won't move either. And I just remember this, Avanti, but I had a time I remember, this was shortly after, I mean, shortly meaning a couple of years after my son's diagnosis, which was really a spiritually dark time for me for those couple of years. And
Mhm.
I remember going to yoga class. I used to go to yoga then like 5 times a week. And
Mm.
I don't do that anymore, but that was, oh, I should get back to that. But anyway, I was in yoga and I literally was kind of bent over. I can't remember in which pose. And the whole class went on to another pose. And it was like my body was telling me to stop. And I
Mhm.
started crying. And out of nowhere, it seemed, right? And I just cried and cried. And I saw this image of my brain literally wringing out like a towel and
Mhm.
wringing out anger and sadness and grief onto the mat. It was so
Mhm.
powerful for me, and it was this moment of recognition of how much I was holding
Yeah.
and how much I was releasing in that moment in those tears, and it literally was wetting my mat with tears, and,
Mhm.
I couldn't have thought myself into that. I couldn't
Yeah.
have sat at home on the couch and thought about, "You're really holding a lot." It
Right. Yeah.
it just wasn't gonna happen that way, but
Mhm.
somehow in that yoga class, I don't even know what the teacher was saying, they weren't even talking about anything. I literally had my own moment, they had gone on to something else, but that's what
Mhm.
movement does. It
Yeah.
helps us release and move what's in us, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because our bodies store the emotions, right? There's been so much talk about this and studies and research in this. And, there are so many authors who have written full books about this, about how we store trauma, how we store emotions in our physical bodies. And so when we move them in certain ways, we can actually start to release those emotions and stop holding them. And I think that's what you're speaking to. And from my perspective, that actually sort of really aligns with the Eastern point of view in Ayurveda and yoga, that, emotions are energy. Energy is moving through our system as prana, right? And so, you know, in yoga, the thing is that in the West, yoga has become synonymous with the asana or the posture.
Yeah.
And that's all we think about. And that's fine. Okay. It is a physical movement. But here's the thing that most people don't realize until they really get deep into yoga and start studying it more, is that hidden in every asana, in every posture, are energetic pathways that are being activated, that are being purified, that are being supplied with fresh prana. And then this fresh prana is circulating because of the movement, the dynamic movement in and out of an asana, out of a posture. We're circulating that energy through the energy body, which is, the chakras, the seven chakras, and then all the thousands of nadis and the marma points that are, the touch points on the surface of the skin. And so what we're doing is we're literally moving energy through physical posture in asana.
It's
That's
so
what yoga
powerful.
is, right? It's so powerful. And that's, I think, perhaps what you were experiencing in that story that you just told us, is that you were in a specific pose and suddenly something unblocked and the emotions came through.
Yeah. I never put it together like that, but that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. And this is important in so many different contexts, not just for emotions this way, but it's also important just, from a longevity perspective, which I just wrote a whole book about. So when
Right.
I was thinking about this, it was bringing that up for me, is that, different asanas are, again, associated with different energy pathways. So they're actually associated with different chakra centers. Every chakra center in the body is associated with different emotions. And so, again, it follows that if you can activate that chakra and purify it, you can also deal with emotions that way. So, it's just kind of like really interesting to think about it that
So
way.
if I'm sad, what posture should I get into?
I mean, there's a lot of different ones. I mean, there's some simple ones. I would say for sadness, for grief, really the heart chakra is always the one that you
That
want
makes sense.
to really activate. That's always a good one to just default. That's actually a good one for a lot of different emotions. But if you really want to, activate the heart, you can do something as simple as camel pose. Actually, cat cow is actually very simple, because cat pose actually activates all seven chakras. So you're actually
Wow.
cleansing all seven. So that's like an easy thing. Just do some cat cow and you'll start to feel like you're actually moving some energy through. Camel pose is a really good one for the heart. Bow pose, bridge pose. These are all good, very simple, almost beginner type, like what you would say as beginner or just basic poses, are really effective to move emotions through so many of the chakras,
I
and to
love that.
cleanse so many chakras. So
I love
there's
that because
actually,
it could be so simple, like,
yeah,
make your morning coffee and while it's brewing, do cat cow for 4 minutes.
exactly. That's all you have to do. And like literally, I mean, I've actually written about this in my book, that there are 10 asanas, 10 poses that if you can continue to do these throughout your life, It will help with longevity for that's a whole nother episode. But with what we're talking about, it'll actually cleanse all of the chakra centers, purify all of the energy pathways in your body, and help you sort of process emotions on a daily basis. Now, of course, can we do more? Of course. And can we do more specific for a specific, chakra? Yeah. But if you can do these 10, which are cat, cow, camel, cobra, boat, bow, bridge, lion, locust, and lotus. It's actually kind of
I like the way
sing-songy.
you group them alphabetically. I mean,
Yeah, I
not
mean,
alphabet, yeah, but by letter.
yeah, yeah. That's easy to remember. Cat, cow, camel, cobra, boat, bow, bridge, lion, locust, lotus. If you do those 10, you're actually going to activate every chakra center in the body and therefore purify all of those energy pathways. And it'll help with, clearing a lot of emotions.
I mean, there's so much wisdom in ancient medicine, right? I
I
mean,
know.
this reminds me of there's a qigong move that I was taught, and I was taught that if I did it 10 times, it would keep me healthy. But if I did
Mhm.
it 100 times a day, I would live forever. And, you can laugh about it like it sounds
Yeah,
funny, but I actually think there's wisdom in that, because what they're
absolutely.
really saying is that if you can keep doing that movement 100 times a day, then you will live forever, because you're lubricating your spine, you're moving
Correct.
your emotions, you're moving
Yep.
your heart. I mean, so there's
Yep.
so much there. But I love this idea of it makes so much sense, because all those poses, I was imagining them as you said them. There's
Mhm.
so much movement of the spine, right? Where the
Yep.
energy's flowing. And so
Yep.
it really makes sense that you're kind of almost, cleansing and moving
Yes.
things out.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, an easy way to do this is if you do a Surya Namaskar, which is a sun salutation, and you can do any variation, A, B, whatever. You could do even a moon salutation, which is a little bit cooler and gentler. But if you were to just do a few rounds of any sun salutation series, you're actually moving your spine in all directions, and you're also purifying all of the chakras. That's actually why that series of poses is strung together. It wasn't just some random thing of like, oh, let's
Right,
go
right.
from this to that. It was actually very specific that it's done in a certain order because of that reason, because you're moving the spine, like you said, lubricating the spine, keeping that flexibility and strength, but you're also cleansing all of these energy centers. So that's a simple thing to remember too. If you don't remember, for all the listeners who are like, okay, what were those 10 poses? I'll say them again: cat, cow, camel, cobra, boat, bow, bridge, lion, locust, lotus. If you can do those 10, but if you can't remember those, just do some Surya Namaskar, do a sun
Mhm.
salutation a few times, and that will help. I'm actually going to ask Tara Stiles to do a sequence on her app of that. I have to
I
remember to tell
like
her.
that, like a
Yeah.
longevity sequence.
Yeah. Yeah, or just like an emotion processing series or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a practice. I'll have to do that. And if
Yeah.
we do it, then I'll link it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, that's really what we're doing, is that we're cleansing the emotions through these energetic pathways.
Maybe it would be helpful if you went over the chakras, because I think people might be wondering about that, and
Yeah.
they ask you.
Okay, yeah. So let's go through the chakras and sort of what emotions you can help move through those,
Please
or
do.
what's associated. Okay, so the root, which is down, which near your sit bones. Let's start there. We're going to start at the bottom and then go up. So root, or the Muladhara chakra. This is really about feeling stability and security. Okay. So when you are fearful, when you are feeling insecure, when you are feeling unsafe, this is the one that you want to sort of activate and clear, so that you can have that feeling of stability and security in your root. So that's the way to think about it. So that's the root. The next one is the sacral chakra. And this one is associated with sexuality, creativity. And so if it's blocked, you're going to feel sort of blocked creatively. You're going to be blocked, sort of feeling blocked in problem solving, or, trying to figure out how to do something. And so, or how to move forward even. So if you're feeling those things, then again, you want to purify the sacral chakra. The next one is the solar plexus, the Manipura chakra. And this is all about self-confidence and power. So
And we're
when
up by
you
our navel now, right?
yeah, at our navel. Sorry, I should say that. And that is when you are maybe feeling judged by others or unsure of yourself, feeling powerless in a situation, right? That would be the time that you really want to sort of cleanse the solar plexus right near your navel. Exactly. That's a good time for that. The next one is the heart chakra, right? The Anahata chakra. This is really, sort of the way you should think about the heart chakra is that it's the connection between the lower chakras, which we just talked about, and the upper chakras. So it's like kind of the bridge between the physical body and the spiritual body and the mental body. And so it really is the bridge between everything. And so really when it's blocked, you're going to feel all kinds of emotions, whether it's fear, grief, jealousy. Maybe you're feeling really down on yourself, unsure of yourself, feeling not hate. I don't want to say hatred. I don't like that word, but like dislike for yourself, something like that. That, or even towards other people where you need some
Mhm.
forgiveness. And so if you need to, really have some love and compassion and forgiveness, this is the chakra that you want to purify and activate. The next one is the throat chakra, right? And so this is really about verbal expression, but also speaking your highest truth, living your highest truth, right? So it's metaphoric, but it's also quite literal, also.
Mhm.
And so if you feel like you're not being heard, if you feel like you are being judged, if you feel like you're not being accepted, right? This is the chakra that you want to sort of work with and clear. The next one is the third eye or Ajna chakra. And this is all about intuition, that sixth sense, right? And so if you are having trouble sort of feeling into like, okay, what is my heart saying? What's my gut saying? What should I do? What's my intuition on this? And you're maybe doubtful or confused, this is the one that you want to really activate. And then you go to the last chakra, which is the crown chakra. And this is, really about enlightenment, connection to our higher self, connection to the universe. So I think that if you are feeling confused, foggy mind, not clear, maybe creatively blocked also, this is actually the one that you really want to clear, the crown chakra, so that you can have that mental clarity and focus and creativity sort of that connection that you feel to a larger source of information that is
Yeah.
sort of helping you make decisions. So that was a lot,
Okay, that
but
was really helpful. And so you're saying that, even some Surya Namaskars will help touch on all of those chakras.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if you just do all of those, you can. And, these are things you can look up also, is you can always look up, Google search it really easily, what asanas are associated with which chakras. And then if you know what chakras are sort of with what emotions, then you can
Yeah.
kind of solve the puzzle. But hopefully we gave you guys some things to think about.
But
So
you could literally kind of design a short movement sequence for yourself every day based on what you're feeling.
yeah, absolutely. Or you could just do the 10 or do a
Yeah.
Surya Namaskar and you've covered everything then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really
Yeah.
powerful. I like
Yeah.
that.
It's really powerful. But I mean, there are different ways that, even like you were telling me about some of the other indigenous practices, shaking, dancing. Like, tell me about some of those because I feel like that's also another form of moving energy or
Yeah.
moving emotions.
Yeah, well, I mean, shaking is sort of the movement meditation in general, asana, shaking, all of it is the sort of most ancient meditation we know. People think
Mhm.
it's sitting in a cross-legged position, but actually movement, back to the whirling dervishes and indigenous communities really working with shaking and dancing. And we draw upon some of that at the Center for Mind Body Medicine and use what we call a shaking dancing meditation that draws on that wisdom and really has three parts where we play some rhythmic music, usually some drums or other rhythmic music without words, to shake to literally for about 5 to 7 minutes, and then a 1 to 2 minute period of silence, of not movement and just
Mm,
breathing, and then dancing. And it's a sequence that I've done in rooms with 400 people or in outside or in small groups with 10,
mhm,
virtually and in person. I mean, it works everywhere.
mhm,
And I have never seen an exercise that literally gets people's emotions moving faster than anything I could do through talk therapy. And
sure.
so I myself, when I do it, sometimes I cry, sometimes I laugh, sometimes I feel joyous, sometimes I feel sad, heavy, it just depends.
Mhm,
But what's really happening is it's primal. Animals shake out their stress after being chased by a predator. And
mhm.
that feeling of hypervigilance and fear, they shake it out and then they move on. They don't sit in therapy for 20 years and figure out what happened like I do. And then, yeah, they're moving out what's sitting there right under the surface. And so
Mhm.
when we shake or dance to music or any kind of movement to music, we literally kind of jitter and shake that stuff up, that emotion that is right at the surface. And so
Mhm.
I remember doing this with psychologists in Ukraine right after the war started, and some of them told me that they had not cried since the bomb started until they did that exercise, because they were so clenched in fear every
Yeah,
day that they
yeah,
were in that freeze mode, and the
yeah.
shaking kind of loosened it up, and then they cried. And some of them actually said, I felt happy for the first, like some people felt joyous and some people cried. It just
Mhm,
needed to shake up what people needed to shake. And so
mhm.
there's real wisdom in the way that we move our bodies.
Right, right. That's incredible. That's incredible. And why the pause or the moment of silence after doing that for 5, 7 minutes? There must be a reason that you
Yeah,
do that.
I don't know the real reason. I've asked Jim Gordon, my mentor, who's the founder at the Center for. I'm like, why do we do that? And he said,
Yeah.
that's what the wise people do, and that's how they taught me. But I think after
Mhm,
doing that exercise thousands of times, I actually think that it might be built in as a way to pause and a way to
mm,
notice.
mhm,
Because invariably, after that shaking period, I notice the energy literally moving in my fingers and toes feel tingly. I can
right.
sense where my emotions are.
Yeah.
And then it goes into this dance movement phase. And then you literally free form flow that movement, that emotion
Mhm,
out. It's ingenious, as most
mhm.
indigenous wise ancient medicine is.
Right, right. Okay, that's cool. So it just gives you a pause to really notice what you've just experienced. So like the emotions that are coming up for you. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
That's yes, that's really interesting that the pause is a way to notice what you've just experienced emotionally. Yeah. I like
Mhm.
that. Really
Because I think you're
interesting.
more actually, this really relates back to what you just taught us, is that you loosen and shake up everything. Then
Mhm.
you pause and you can really notice where either the blockage or release is. I mean, you really
Mm,
can feel it more, and you
mhm,
pause and notice, you take deep breaths. We usually have people keep their eyes closed if they were able to close their eyes, and you really connect into your body in a different way. And in fact,
mhm,
that shaking part of the exercise we do with feet planted, not moving around. So your body's really planted, grounded in the earth. And
mhm,
so I think there's something to that. I think you're connecting, you're loosening in your chakras, you're unblocking, and you're noticing. So it's
mhm.
powerful.
Yeah, that's really powerful. It's super powerful. And so, what I'm thinking about is like, okay, so this is like a shaking movement. We've talked about asana, but what do you think the power is of walking as
Mm.
a way to move emotions? Because, I find that going for a walk sometimes is like the best strategy for me to move an emotion. Why do you think that works? Because The other things are like very specific to, and as we already talked about, the asanas are, there's hidden energetic pathways, and the shaking is very specific of how you're doing is quite vigorous. And so, what do you think it is about walking that is so healing for emotions or to help move the emotions?
Yeah, because I really agree with you. I wonder if it has to do with some of the science that's been exposed around walking, which are a
Mhm,
couple of things. One is that it decreases our stress because we actually decrease our cortisol levels by breathing in the air from the trees and the phytosides that they secrete.
mhm,
I wonder if that helps us to relax and calm so we feel like we can connect a little better with our
mhm,
emotions.
mhm,
And then there is real science around walking actually helping us improve the increased cells literally in our hippocampus, which is the brain structure that's most connected to memory and also connected to emotion. And I
mhm.
wonder sometimes if that helps us remember literally, ourselves and connect back to what we're feeling. I think that a big thing of it is being outside in nature. I
Yeah,
really do
I
because
would
I
agree.
don't feel the same way. I don't do it often because I don't like it, but if you put me on a treadmill in a
Yeah,
gym,
yeah.
that doesn't do what a walk outside does for me
Mhm,
ever. It
mhm.
gives me exercise and I might feel my heart beating and endorphins releasing and all of
Yeah,
that. But
right.
I don't feel that kind of movement of my emotions in the way I do when I walk in the woods.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of, the Japanese practice of forest bathing, right?
Yep.
I know I'm not going to say this right. Shinrin yoku. Is that how you
Yeah,
say it?
that's how I
Yeah.
think you say it. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I mean, they've done a lot of studies on that, of this idea of forest bathing, of like
Yeah.
actually walking in the forest and what it does. Right. And that there's the phytochemicals that you were talking about from the trees, which actually reduce cortisol in our bloodstream. So, I
Yeah.
mean, there is a physiological thing, but I would also say from an energetic point of view, like from an Ayurvedic point of view, the reason that walking outside, especially in somewhere that's like, a forest with lots of trees, is because trees actually can access all three major sources of prana, of that life force
Ah,
energy,
tell me
right?
more
Because
about that.
so there are three sources of prana, right? It's the sun, the earth, and the wind, right? Those three really have lots of prana in them, and a tree is actually accessing all of those sources. It's like it like takes it all in and stores it. So when you're around trees, you're actually accessing huge amounts of fresh prana, which when you are walking, right, you're breathing that in, you're moving that energy through you. So you're replenishing your whole system with fresh prana, which I think is, again, back to the asana conversation we had. It's actually flushing the energy body, all the chakra centers. It's purifying everything. So it's moving those energies through. That's what I think is
Ugh,
happening.
I've never heard that reason, and I love it. That
Yeah.
resonates for me.
Yeah. And so I think that's again, that may not be the data science of it, but I think it
Right.
correlates with the data science that we have of the phytochemicals coming from the trees. And the ancients were thinking about it as prana, and it's
Yeah.
actually phytochemicals, right? So it's
Yeah.
I love when I see these points where everything sort of intersects, and you're like, oh, they knew what they were talking about 5,000 years ago.
I
They
know.
didn't have these Western modern names to them, but they knew there was something happening. So I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
that's
really
so cool.
interesting.
I love that.
Yeah.
I feel like, I don't know if you ever do this, but when I walk outside, sometimes if I'm having a hard day, then I literally will stop and close my eyes. First, I'll look at the trees around me and then I'll ask them for guidance. And then I'll close my eyes and do deep breathing with the trees. And I imagine them encircling me. They are encircling me, but I imagine them reaching out to me.
Mhm.
And then when I open my eyes, I swear to you, I feel like I'm more connected to them, like something has
Mhm.
happened. And I
Mhm.
wonder if it's because I'm intentionally breathing in the prana, you know?
Mhm.
So I'm going to put that into my meditation next time when I do that. Just that
Okay. Yeah.
knowing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would love to hear what you come up with. Like what happens for you and what you
Yeah.
experience. We'll talk about that on another call,
Yeah.
on a walk
Yeah.
and talk. Okay, so the other thing that we were going to talk about is, so that's, we know we've talked about mood, stress reduction, right? Let's talk about creativity because this is a really interesting one. I feel like movement really helps with creativity, and we looked up some stuff on that. So let's talk about that. So, what do you think about creativity and movement?
Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of studies. I was talking to you about that Stanford walking study from 2014, but there are a bunch of studies that
Hmm.
show that people, when they walk more,
Hmm.
are more creative in their work, in their art, in their thinking, that they
Hmm.
actually have more ideas. They feel more invigorated and excited. They reach solutions easier. You know,
Hmm.
that there's something about this sort of rhythmic motion of walking, they think, that
Yep.
actually facilitates what they call some cognitive flexibility. I mean,
Hmm.
which, when they say it like that, all I can think is, yeah, because you're moving and that moves your brain. It's moving, you know? So like you were saying, all those lights and connections
Yeah.
go on for me. And
Right.
there's just this way that creativity, I mean, I don't know about you, but I literally on a walk have to stop and voice message myself an
Yep.
idea because I
Yep.
know I will forget it later.
Hmm.
And I'm so excited that I can't even contain myself,
Right.
that it seems to come out of the blue.
Hmm.
But I think that it's just that walking spurs that creative sort of out of the box thinking, looking from a different perspective, right?
Hmm. Hmm. But there's probably something physiologically going on, right? Like,
Probably.
right? Increased flow of blood to the brain, oxygen to the brain, nutrients to the brain, right? Which is obviously going to help your mental performance with greater focus, better recall of memory and maybe of being able to make connections between things that help you think creatively or brainstorm or, having a better reaction time of between things. I don't know. That feels
I
like
mean, it
something,
has to, because I
right?
mean, right, we know about that hippocampal stimulation, and
Right.
also they found, just to support your prana, they
Mhm.
found that walking outdoors was better than walking indoors in terms of creativity and problem solving. And so,
Mhm.
there's a lot happening there. And people, they did acknowledge that people feel less stressed because of that forest bathing effect. They
Mhm.
feel less stressed. And so they're able to think better. We know that when we're less stressed, we dampen the amygdala and the threat center, and we initiate or ignite or improve the functioning of our prefrontal cortex, where we have executive function, critical thinking, and motivation.
Mhm.
So we're more creative and more insightful when we're
Mhm.
out of our midbrain, which is all about just surviving. We can't think
Mhm.
of how to thrive and solve. We're just in survival mode in our midbrain. And
Right.
so that walk helps dampen that. So
Right.
it really speaks to this idea we were talking about in the beginning about, how do you put into your day some movement? So if you're going to be writing a book like you just did,
Yeah.
or, doing something like that where you're critically thinking, problem solving, I can't think of work that isn't like that.
Mhm.
Then, work in every hour a 10-minute walk or a 5-minute walk every
Right.
hour and a half. Just get up and walk around your office or your home or outside
Mhm.
and spur that. It feels like people think they can't take a break, quote unquote, but I would look at it as part of your work.
Right.
Part of your
Right.
human work
Right.
is to give your brain and body that movement.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's also the reason that so many people now who are quote high performers, and I know we don't want to talk about that, but if this encourages people who are listening to go and take a walk, then it's great. Then we're doing our job, right? Is this whole idea of doing walking meetings, right? A walk and talk.
Yes.
We do that all the time, right? a walk and talk, or even, a lot of meetings, people will meet standing up now. They don't let everybody sit down because people are just more effective. You're standing, so you're going to, get through things faster. But I do think it's like you're kind of, if you're standing, you're engaging your muscles. Like there's something going on. You're having to have some blood flow. So I do think there's something there that, like, people find that it makes them more productive, more creative. They can brainstorm and work together as a team better. So I would encourage people to even do these meetings, walking, like, especially if you're talking on the phone, or, if you can not do a video call, which, all of us are trying to get off of Zoom and video and all this stuff, is do, a walking meeting, and you can get as much done. You may not be able to take notes, but at least you are moving your body. And I find that I'm more creative. Like a lot of times when we're talking, we come up with all these great ideas, and
Yeah.
literally I have to stop and take notes. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's really helpful.
And I've made a rule that, there's a lot of these sort of connecting meetings, or people saying, "Can I pick your brain about this or that?" And if I have time to do it, my rule is I will only do it on the phone while I'm walking, because
Yeah.
I cannot sit on the video more,
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think if you make your own kind of rules for whatever your work or
Right.
days look like, where, I only do my team meeting walking, or whatever it is, it promotes well-being for everyone if you suggest that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, especially if you're leading a team, because whatever you do, you're actually allowing other people to do too, from a product, from a team standpoint or a management standpoint. Not that that's what we were going to get into, but I think the point
Yeah,
is
yeah,
that, movement, physical movement does more than just move your body. It's nourishing your brain. It's helping you be more creative. It's helping your mood. It's helping you move emotions, right? All the things that are really good for your health overall. So why wouldn't you do it? Right. That's
yeah,
and how are you gonna build it into your day?
yeah, and I mean, how literally schedule it in, meaning
Mhm.
not schedule on a calendar, but make a plan.
Yeah.
Think about it. Like I today, because your mind will think of all the reasons not to do it.
Exactly. Exactly. And so let's end this episode, this discussion, with just some, like, really easy strategies or suggestions for the listeners of how they could maybe work this into their day so that it's a non-negotiable and it's something that they just do automatically. The first thing I would say is, sort of make it a habit to get outside for that morning walk. You're going to kill two birds with one stone, in essence, because you're doing your morning sun viewing, and
Yes,
you're getting out for a walk. If you could do that first thing in the morning, so you're getting that prana moving, and then you're also resetting your circadian rhythm. So that would be my first suggestion.
I
What would
love
you
that
say
one.
next? What would you say
Next, I
next?
would say if you brew tea or coffee is, I would say while you're steeping or brewing that, you make a rule that you'll do, cat cow, or a couple of sun salutations,
Mhm.
or air squats for that matter, right next to the
Yeah,
pot,
yeah,
And it's not about exercise. I'm just saying, like, get your blood flowing and get your moving so that your emotions don't start in a stuck place.
yeah. I love that. I love that. And then the next one I would say is that, make sure that you schedule in your work day, or, if you're home and you're going to have a phone call with a friend, just make sure that you're doing a walk and talk.
Yes.
Schedule that somewhere in the middle of your day, at least 15 minutes, that a meeting, or, a catch up with a friend, or a call to your mom or parent, whatever it is, that you're going to make it a 15-minute walk and talk. I think that that's a really easy way, and make it outside if you can. Just go
Yeah.
outside for a walk and do the talk at the same time. That would be
Yeah.
another thing I'd say.
So even just one of those a day, right, would be
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. Amazing. Just one a day.
And then I would say, I think that maybe the last one, I mean, I feel like this is really doable, honestly. I don't think,
Mhm.
we're talking about getting up and doing your sun viewing while you take a 10-minute walk.
Mhm.
We're talking about then while you brew your morning drink, doing a few cat cows or stretches or whatever you feel is right for you.
Mhm. Right.
One walk and talk during the day, just one. And it can
Yeah.
be a talk to a friend, which is great for
Yes.
your heart and
Yeah,
connection.
for
And then the
sure.
last one I would say is can you at the end of your workday or whatever and this counts whether you're working at home by raising your family or working on a job that you're getting paid for, is
Mhm.
that somehow can you transition into your evening with some movement, a short
Yeah.
walk, because everything that you're doing through the day kind of, especially if you're home caring for children, but
Yeah.
anything you're doing,
Right.
it just so much emotions pent up all day and there's
Right.
nowhere to release them. And so
Yeah.
can you make a movement transition from one part of the day to another, whatever that is
Mhm.
for you? I
Yeah.
mean, that
I
doesn't have
love
to be the last one, but I'm just trying to think of how this can be doable.
Yeah, no, I love that. And then the last one, I mean, because we can give 5 different points that you can
Okay.
do
Yeah.
this, is that, you know, after your last meal of the day, that can be a great way to connect with other people in your family, a friend, just even going for 15 minutes. And it's also you're doing something good for your health because you're actually using up all that glucose from the food that you ate. Your muscles are using it. And so it's just good for your health all around. But it's really good. You can clear your mind before you go to sleep, and
Exactly.
settle your mind a little bit. So even that would be a really great time to add a walk. And if you could do all 5, amazing. If you
Right.
can do
Right.
just one, that is amazing, right?
I
Just even
agree. I
yeah,
agree.
start with one, whatever makes sense, in your day. Commit to this is the time I'm going to get some movement in. Walking is the easiest thing, some stretches, some simple asanas, whatever you can do, some shaking, dancing. You can do that inside the house, like jam to your favorite song for 5 minutes. Those are all things that you can do, and just commit to one of those and try it out for a few weeks and see how you
Yeah.
feel. Right?
Yeah.
And then you'll be motivated to add another break, another walking, movement break during the day.
I agree.
So yeah, I think that's a great place to
I
start.
love that plan. And your last walk of the day even doubles for dusk viewing, which helps sleep. So
Yes.
it's like
Yes.
giving your body the right signals, right? These
Yeah.
are really good. I think they're all doable. And like you said, one a day, two a day, just see what works for you. But the
Mhm.
idea is to move more so that you can move your emotions more and you don't get stuck.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's a good place to end
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
conversation. Then me, thank you as always for all your wisdom and your great
You
ideas. And
too.
yeah, and tell the listeners, I hope this helps you. And, give us a shout out on Instagram or send us a message and let us know what you thought, if you had any takeaways or what you've tried. And also, if you have ideas for other topics that you want Dr. Thanmeet and I to talk about, let us know. We'd love to
Yeah,
talk
for
about what
sure.
you're interested in. So thanks,
Yeah.
Thanmeet.
Thank you. I'm gonna go breathe in some prana after this
Okay, sounds good. I'm going to
from
do
the
the same
trees.
thing. Yeah, sounds good.